All right, and welcome to Fastbreak Breakfast, NBA podcast. My name is Keith. Got John Hollinger coming up in a little bit. Caitlin Cooper at the end of the show. But right now, the one and only John Burr. John, how are you?
Mahalo. John Hollinger. That's exciting.
It is exciting. I'm going to press him hard.
I don't believe you, but I'm excited.
Grizzlies history. Ben McLemore over Tony
foods.
Allen. Let's do it. No, this is great. We're in the beginning of training camp for all NBA teams right now. I'm currently poring over basically frame by frame releases of social media teams to find out like who are the lineups the teams are practicing with, because these are closed practices. It's a lot of big research. Another thing, I thought you'd enjoy this. Unrelated to training camp, John. This is more about the joys of homeownership. This might be more main show material.
Oh,
We had our roof replaced recently. I believe there was some hail damage that occurred while we were on Twitch at one point. It turned out there was in fact a lot of damage. Got the roof replaced. Anyway, the roofer came by to pick up the first insurance check because my insurance company, they mail me a check. I deposit a check because I'm not about to not deposit a check. And anyway, this guy comes by to pick it up, and I've seen this guy a couple times, but now he looks like he got in a fight. Looks like he got beat up. He has like a big Band-Aid over his face. He's got a cut on the bridge of his nose. The side of his face without a Band-Aid is it's like red and a little puffy.
Are your roofers the mini Saints of Newark? What's going on here?
Honestly, I thought this guy just had a roofing accident. This guy fell off a ladder or something, or like a pallet of shingles hit him in the face. He also had like what looked like road rash on his leg, like torn up leg, like he fell off a bike or something. So this guy looked pretty torn up. I also had just recently rewatched the film Wind River. Mm-hmm. Where they go up to the guys and they're all beat up. But
you rewatched Wind River?
The FBI agent is like, hey, you guys are kind of torn up. Anyway, I said, hey, man, did you have a roofing accident? What's up? He's like, no, I had to pop a zit. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I just had to pop a zit. And that's what this Band-Aid's for. I was like, but there's a cut on the bridge of your nose and the rest of your face is like red. He's like, yeah, there was a zit on my nose too.
That's the most insane you should see the other guy I've ever heard in my life.
That's how I felt. And my wife overheard this and was like, I can't believe what that guy shared with you. First of all,
his wife beat his ass.
Well,
that's a battered woman response.
Well, that's what I said. This is an abusive relationship. That person was beat up head to toe. And he's like, oh yeah, I popped a zit. I didn't know if in the roofing world, is it too shameful to be known as a roofer who fell off his ladder? Is that like maybe
it's like I used to paint houses and he killed some people.
that could be true, but that was a weird day for me. No, I guess we should go back to the basketball real quick. The highlight for me of this media days that's happened so far is, I don't know if you saw this, we got some more run on our Boban shirt. Boban Marjanovic, Nick Angstadt, who does the Locked On Mavericks, was wearing the shirt, and Boban stopped and took a photo with it and got very excited. Have you seen anything that's caught your eye in the day since camp opened?
Well, I saw two very different numbers. And there was like 50 million in between the two numbers I saw. And those two numbers were reported Michael Porter Jr. signings. So I guess I should take the smaller number.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Well, we've now hit this. It's
a new phenomenon.
We're not quite to the NFL yet.
Yeah.
But the agents have started reporting like the biggest possible numbers. Like if Michael Porter Jr. makes an all defensive team, like he can,
if he lands on the moon,
get this full max. If he becomes an MVP, wins a title. But yeah,
should have put some COVID incentives in there, baby.
Yeah, I loved how Michael Burr Jr. signs. I don't know what the final numbers are, like 5-year, 160, and then right after signing it, he's like, I will never get vaccinated.
How much is MAGA Porter Jr. going to make if he only plays half the games?
Well, he shouldn't have that problem unless Denver passes one of these laws. The NBA did come out they announced that players like Kyrie, possibly like Andrew Wiggins, possibly, who are in these municipalities, those guys will lose their pay if they miss games because of not being vaccinated. This has hilariously huge positive ramifications for the Warriors' luxury tax issues. Like every game's
light years, baby.
I'm pretty sure every game Wiggins misses is like an extra $1 million that
Wow.
Joe Lacob doesn't have to pay. I guess the other thing before I get you out of here that I thought was interesting, two things. One, it turns out Karis LeVert is hurt again, and he's got
stress fracture.
He's got a stress fracture in his back.
Seems bad.
It does seem bad. And maybe the worst part of this is the whole time that I found out Karis LeVert had a stress fracture in his back, I was thinking of TJ Warren. I thought it was another TJ Warren injury. And I just very recently, I was like, it's Karis. I don't know how my brain could put those together. Another thing I thought was funny, not funny. How do you feel about this, John? Ty Lue has said who's going to be his starters. He's pretty sure he knows who his starters are going to be for the Clippers. They're going to start Eric Bledsoe. It's going to be Reggie Jackson, Eric Bledsoe, who the Grizzlies had no interest in. They'd rather have Jarrett Culver.
Do you remember when, I'm going to make another Sopranos reference, when they let Uncle Junior be the boss?
Yes, I do.
I feel like that's how Eric Bledsoe is going to be the starting point guard.
Oh, that's how they get him to buy in. Oh, that's very smart. Okay, so I was thinking, all right, Reggie Jackson, Bledsoe.
I mean, this is his second tour of
Morris,
duty in Clipperdom, you know.
Maybe you're right. Maybe they're like, this guy's never going to bring the fire if he comes off the bench. We have to say, yeah, you are in fact in charge. That's I think it's a good call.
Fair to Midland theory.
Is there anything else we need to say?
I don't think so.
Okay. Let me find
brief, but there's just not much.
Let me find an ad that I can Yeah, I think you're right. So you're saying Bledsoe, I still shouldn't take in fantasy. Maybe a bounce back year. You can get him for $1 maybe at the end. He's not going to bounce back with like a 15.5 assist.
I'm trying to think of any way to spin Eric Bledsoe in fantasy. Like, he doesn't even really get steals anymore.
Man, I spent a good amount of money on him last year based on he was so efficient in Milwaukee, and then all that fell apart. But anyway,
it helps to play with the two of the best forwards in the entire Eastern Conference.
Yes. So now that we know I can't draft Bledsoe, it's going to be risky to drafting Bradley Beal. Kyrie Irving's out. Wiggins is out. Jonathan Isaac, was he going to play anyway?
We need to create a Twitter account that just does COVID stuff for fantasy.
Has anyone asked Jonathan Isaac if he's healthy? Like, how are his knees? Like, I don't care about his antibodies. Like, are his knees even like? Are we doing all this over a guy who's still going to miss the whole year?
I think his bad knees qualify as comorbidities. He really needs to get these shots up.
Yeah. If you want to play fantasy basketball with us and try to figure out all of these questions, why don't you join our Patreon? You do that at patreon.com/Fastbreak Breakfast. It's the only way to play the world's greatest negative fantasy league, where you get points for missed shots and turnovers and fouls, and you lose points when your guys make shots. It is wild. It is so much fun. The draft is going to be October 17th. So please get involved with that. If you want to play, you have to sign up at patreon.com/Fastbreak Breakfast. Well, John, I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to bring in Mr. Hollinger and put him to the test.
Arrivederci.
Talk to you next week.
See you, man.
All right, man. Thanks. I'm joined right now by John Hollinger. John, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. I'm obviously very excited to have you on. Hopefully you will answer some questions I have about your time with the Grizzlies. But before we get there, we got to talk about breakfast. That's how we always start. Have you had breakfast?
Yes.
What's your typical breakfast, and what was today's breakfast?
It might not look like it, but I eat Korean food for breakfast almost every single morning.
That sounds amazing.
Yes. So my wife is Korean. My in-laws live right up the street, and My mother-in-law is kind enough and talented enough to cook us breakfast every morning. So I eat a variety of Korean things for breakfast every single morning.
Are these specifically breakfast items?
So generally it's a soup that is, traditionally served at breakfast. Sometimes I have breakfast like these Korean pancakes called puchinge. And that's what I had this morning. But yeah, all kinds of good stuff. But yeah, like just these really warm, hearty soups that, will have a lot of vegetables in them, whether it's, Korean potatoes or greens or hobak, which is like this squash type thing. That's a popular Korean vegetable. So yeah, all kinds of stuff. So it's good.
That's amazing. You've opened a whole new door for me for someone who hosts a breakfast themed podcast, incredibly ignorant about Korean breakfast options.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff, man.
That's amazing. I'll definitely have to try it. You're also known as like a copious coffee drinker, right? You consume a lot of coffee. Is that an accurate representation?
Yes. Yes.
How do you feel about, we had a controversy on our show, a confusion over the term cups of coffee, because a cup is obviously a unit of measurement, which is 8 ounces. A cup on a coffee maker is 6 ounces. And then a cup is just what you drink your coffee out of.
Yeah.
So if I were to ask you, how many cups of coffee do you have?
I would go by the actual cups in my drinking container. Yeah. Okay. I would not go based on the little things on the side of the coffee. Yeah.
But do you have any concepts like how many ounces of coffee you drink? Like how much are we talking about?
I would not know how many ounces.
I love it.
I mean, I could go backwards.
Keep it a mystery. No, you don't have to.
I could go backwards and estimate it's probably like 24 to 30 ounces a day, but
now we're talking.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. Well, thanks for humoring me there. I think I want to start with, based on your experience in the Grizzlies front office, how's the relationship between a front office and a coaching staff, and how can you apply that maybe to what you see with the Grizzlies right now, as far as the synergy based on if it's playing time and lineup combinations used with players? How much on the same page are they?
I mean, it varies, and it can vary at different times within the same coaching tenure. So, I mean, we had 4 different coaches while I was there, 4 very distinct personalities. I think from a front office perspective, it's probably better to communicate priorities rather than specifics.
Sure.
And in other words, it's use an obvious example. Like, we took Jaren Jackson with the 4th pick. Probably shouldn't be getting DNPs, right? The master of the obvious. Master of the obvious example.
Not just DNPs. What are the feelings like? So I remember this. I remember this actually specifically railing on Twitter against. I was like, I wish JB Bickerstaff would perhaps close games with Jaren, because he clearly seems to be one of the best players. In that situation, you're like, all right, does this guy have to earn 4th quarter minutes? What are we doing there? And so what's your opinion on that situation?
Yeah, that one's a little tougher, because you want to empower your coach to read the game and react situationally to what's happening. But when you see a larger trend line, that can be a difficult conversation, because you're basically telling the coach is what you think he's doing is dumb, right? At the end of the day,
that's what I was doing. I don't think he checked my Twitter though.
I think it's important to, one, have enough equity in the relationship from the word go that you can have those kinds of conversations without the coach feeling attacked. I mean, it's basic, human relations 101, right?
Right.
And then, having hopefully enough information to back up what you think. You got to read the room a little bit too, though, in terms of understanding if there are other reasons besides the reasons you think for why something is happening. Because, I mean, there are definitely times where you'll hear an explanation that's coming from a completely different place than you were perceiving the problem. Just because the coaches are looking at a completely not completely different, but they're just looking at the chessboard very differently than you are. They just are.
Right.
They're thinking a lot in terms of, a lot of times they're thinking in terms of locker room dynamics, or in terms of, well, if I do this in the first quarter, then what does that do to me in the third quarter? Or just, 10 different other things that you might not be thinking of in the moment when you're like, why is this dude in the game right now?
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into that. And I think, part of a good working relationship is being able to hear your coach out and say, okay, maybe I'll back off a little on this one, or conversely, knowing when to say, okay, I hear you, but here's the thing, and this is why this is important to us. And
I know what Jamaica Green
is. It's a political relationship at the end. At the end of the day, it's a human back and forth, and everyone's territorial in their own way. The same way. I'm sure coaches are like, why'd they trade for this guy? He sucks.
Right.
Right. So it goes both ways, but I think at the end of the day, just build. You have to establish through the course of the time you're together, that relationship and that back and forth. So that you can have that conversation, and so it's not an ambush when you do have it.
Yeah. Projecting that to what's going on currently with the Grizzlies, they seem, this current regime seems to act like they're all on the same page, and, they agree on whatever lineups and player acquisition. But me and like all the Grizzlies fans I communicate with a lot, like we're all convinced they traded Grayson Allen just so Taylor Jenkins would stop playing Grayson Allen so much. I know there's obviously, he's an expiring contract. They got some picks for him, but we're like last year, this is like an unhealthy obsession of mine. It's the D'Anthony Melton. It's like, well, D'Anthony Melton is great. Why aren't we playing D'Anthony Melton? We have 2 years of data. Like I'm looking at it from this fan perspective of, all right, Cleaning the Glass tells me they're plus 10 per 100 possessions when Melton and Ja play together. They're plus 15 when they play together with Dylan Brooks. That makes sense. Why aren't we ever playing this? Like, what's the part of the chessboard that maybe I'm not seeing for why that like never comes into fruition?
I mean, I don't know exactly what happened last year. I mean, like you, I was a little surprised at times that Allen seemed to be playing at times instead of Melton. There are times as a front office where that's a decision you might need to make, where you say, if we just trade this guy, or and hopefully you actually have the option to do it, because if the guy's a bad player, then you can't trade him either, right? So,
right. Well, like Grayson's a functional player, but we're just like, all right, we have these younger guys who
I think more generally
exciting.
though, I mean, I think I don't know if the Allen trade was specifically targeted toward that as much as the the Grizzlies. I was just writing about Portland before I did this. The Grizzlies had so many players in that like 6'4", 6'5" shooting guard rate. I mean, surely they had to trade somebody, right? They just had too many guys. So, and based on what I've heard, they were kind of canvassing the league, just trying to find out what everyone's value was. And I think just ended up taking the best deal for where they are right now. So I don't know if this was like specifically targeted to substitution patterns, or more was just a general thinning of the herd that needed to happen.
Yeah, I still believe, and I feel like we've made this joke a lot, that it was like the Moneyball scene where it's you can't start this guy anymore. I've traded him now, and that's what, again, I think most people I talk to, and maybe I live in a weird sheltered corner of like Grizzlies fandom, where we're like, good, we get to play Bane and Melton. That seems like a positive step for the Grizzlies. Based on your time, were there any acquisitions where you were like, hey, we got this guy to do this thing, why aren't you letting this guy do his thing?
Probably happened once or twice. Yeah. I could probably think of a couple scenarios where we got a guy and it just, the two guys I'm thinking of in particular ended up filling the role that we saw for them. It just took a while. And sometimes coaches like have to get used to a guy and doesn't totally occur to them right away what the best usage is for that guy. So sometimes a guy in a new team, it can just take a little bit to really slot them into that right place.
Are there specifics? Can I throw names at you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to leave any tire marks here, you know.
I got you. I remember at least wondering a lot, going back to like when Ed Davis was on the team.
Sure.
Where it's like, it seems like we should free Ed Davis a little bit and play. I remember this is one of the earliest, when I finally like got maybe more seriously into following the NBA. I remember tracking like the Grizzlies' 1-loss record when Ed Davis played over 15 minutes. And I remember being like, the Grizzlies are 19-2 when this guy plays 14 minutes in a game. Like, why doesn't he ever like get a little more playing time? So, but we don't have to do specifics. That's totally fine. I also wonder, as a front office, what are the difficulties considering like sunken cost, or like you've invested in something? Because I think of right now, last year, the Grizzlies put a lot of resources into acquiring Justice Winslow.
Yeah.
And they paid Dion Waiters' salary for a year and a half. They had him on the team, and then last year was a huge disappointment for Justice Winslow. But on one hand, you're like, well, they played him 80 minutes with Ja Morant total.
Yeah,
that's all they needed to see, and they're like, all right, let's move on. That experiment didn't work. So like, what's the difficulty, or like, how do you factor in? Do you have to ignore like the price you paid for something like Justice Winslow?
Yeah, I mean, sunk costs are definitely a real thing in the NBA. I mean, you definitely see, I mean, just with guys with guaranteed contracts or not making rosters, right? Or, you'll see it, especially, year 2 or year 3 with a guy that a team invested a lot in, they'll probably still ride it out longer. First round picks actually are a perfect example. Like, how many teams just, pick up those 3rd and 4th year options no matter what, even if they know it's not happening. So I do think that is a real thing in the league. I thought the Grizzlies last year had a really interesting situation with Winslow, because he hadn't really played, and the team was doing fine without him, but they had to at least find out, based on the investment they made. And I'm sure that, would be an example of probably a difficult coach front office conversation, because especially when Winslow started playing and it was pretty clear it wasn't happening. Right. And how long do we ride this out? Is it worth missing the playoffs to find out if this guy can play or not? Right. Cause that was almost where it was headed. Right.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think they ended up navigating that pretty well, all things considered, where they got enough information to know it wasn't worth picking up the option. But they still didn't torpedo their season collecting that information. So I think it probably ended up in the right place. I'm sure, I don't have any inside information here, but I'm sure there were some uncomfortable conversations along the way to that point.
My confusion from watching this from afar with that situation was, did the front office think we got Justice Winslow to be a ball handler, or did we get him to be just kind of like a wing, like a connective piece alongside maybe your better players, alongside Ja and Jonas, or when Jaren plays? And so my thinking was, I think of Winslow as like a defender, a wing, a guy who could fit nicely alongside like Kyle Anderson and Dylan Brooks at the same time. That's a very formidable defense, some optionality on offense, maybe a little lacking, obviously, on shooting. And like, Justice didn't make any shots. That's a big part of it. Like, he made no shots last year, but still, like, the question was, did the front office or the coaching staff say, we got him to run our second unit as a point guard? Because that deployment seemed so strange to me, as opposed to just let Justice find his feet being the 4th option on like with some of the better players.
Yeah. I mean, that was a little interesting. I mean, his best stretch probably of his career came when he was playing as like a pseudo point guard in Miami. So I think some of that played into it. And then the idea that you can play these big lineups with him as a point, and you can switch and do things that you can't do with Tyus Jones. So I'm sure that mentality was part of it too. But I still think at the end of the day, the main reason for the trade wasn't to find a different backup point guard, right? It was it was that he could be a starting caliber wing with size, which that you can see they're still out there hunting for by some of the other moves they've made. And So to your point, yeah, you could have played him more with John Morant. I just think his inability to shoot just torpedoed that from the word go.
No, it makes sense. I mean, it was special. I mean, the the lack of shooting was historic. You could argue. What were your opinions of the way the Grizzlies have operated this last year, or maybe 2 years, where they seem to really value their chemistry of their locker room and maybe their young guys, and not having an interest seemingly in bringing in maybe the quote unquote wrong guy, or having no interest? Like, they obviously got Eric Bledsoe from the Pelicans, and we don't know. All right, so maybe Eric Bledsoe didn't want to show up to Memphis. You know, we're not sure there, but like, the Grizzlies didn't really want or seemingly have an interest to this guy who's, you know, a decent NBA player, who Ty Lue said is going to start for him in LA. And then like they end up with Patrick Beverley. You're like, all right, Patrick Beverley, you know, like, I think we understood following this as Grizzlies fans, like, these guys aren't going to be on the team. They're just moving pieces. But like, what's this thought of the Grizzlies not valuing proven, sometimes NBA players, and saying, you know what, we would rather try out Jarrett Culver. Like, we would rather turn this larger piece. Is it just the salaries? Is it just we want to break up the salaries, not to deal with it? Or
I think it's looking ahead beyond this year. I mean, neither Bledsoe or Beverly was going to be on the team after this year.
Sure.
And so they're trying to get pieces who could maybe be on the team going forward. When you're already like 13 deep or whatever, like the Grizzlies are, like the value of an additional rotation caliber player just isn't that high. I think that's also why you saw them shift directions and swing for the fences in the draft on their 2 picks, instead of taking like more like steady college senior types that they took the last 2 drafts, who could, you know, who were more likely to become rotation pieces, but perhaps less likely to be the third star around John Jaren, right? And so you see, I think you've seen that directional shift in response to the fact that they got enough rotation caliber guys. Like, that's not the thing that they need at this point. What they need is to just increase the caliber of the 5 best players they can put on the floor at any one time.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me. Like, their vision, that part of it does make a lot of sense. And then there's other times where I'm like, is it helpful? I mean, just to have sometimes like just those veterans around. This team did at least bring in, I mean, I don't know if Chris Dunn is long for the Grizzlies, but like just having a Steven Adams, like there were past years where they were flipping salaries around, and like CJ Miles was around, or Kyle Korver was around. And you wonder, like, is it useful to have these proven veterans there inside the locker room, as opposed to taking another flyer on a guy that, you know, might pan out for being on the team longer?
I mean, they at least kept a couple around, right? I'm trying to, like, I mean, we still had a lot of veterans my last year there, but then that first year, you had Valanciunas, you had Jay Crowder most of the year, you had Solomon Hill most of the year, and I think those guys were kind of valued for what they brought to that, and were missed after the trade. And then they brought in Tolliver toward the end, who's like, you know, very like respected locker room guy. And then this last year, they still had some of that too. You still had Jonas there.
Gorgie Jang was there for a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Gorgie Jang was there for a little bit.
Oh yeah, Gorgie. Yeah. Who's a very popular teammate. So so I don't think they ever completely abandoned that. But they definitely weren't going to overdo it either.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, I got to ask you, since this is something I don't think I've ever heard, like the inside story of, if you can tell me, like the decision, and it was a correct decision, you know, to move on from Zach Randolph and Tony Allen, but it's still in the time that has to be like a difficult decision. And there's more beyond the on-court product sometimes. I mean, especially I feel like in Memphis, like there's business decisions and like the popularity. So like obviously it was difficult, but like what was that like as far as the front office discussions?
Well, you know, we realized where we were at that point in our kind of franchise's arc, and to be honest, we probably should have taken it further. I mean, that's what we should have just blown up the team. But instead we decided the move was to go younger. And obviously, I mean, once Zach got that deal from Sacramento, it was like,
right. Did we ever find out why exactly? I mean, I love Zach Randolph, one of my favorite all-time
why
players.
Sacramento?
Why Sacramento?
$24 million deal at that time. Yeah, that was weird.
I heard a rumor, which I'm sure is totally false, that like Yeager was trying to like stick it to the Grizzlies somehow by overpaying for Zach Randolph. It seems farcical.
I'm not really sure he even had the juice there
right.
Their moment to do that, even if he had wanted to.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, and so we just felt like it was time, and I think that's one thing that we definitely got right, that that was the time to to make that decision with those two, as hard as it was. And it's one of the tough things about being in a front office, that you develop these relationships with these guys. And I'll use Courtney as a good example, because he came in and left while I was there, but it was like, we brought him in, he helped us immediately. He was a great guy. Everyone loved him. And then after 2.5 years, it was like, we have a deal on the table to get 4 second-round picks, right. And our season's, going down the chute. Like, like this is totally obvious. And so unfortunately, and you end up having to trade this guy, and do that. And it's great. It worked out, right? Like, I mean, Dylan Brooks is one of the guys they got with those picks. So, but like that I think is one of the hard and weird things, that that they're most likely you're going to end up trading these guys that you're, developing these relationships with. And it's just such a weird part of the business.
Yeah. And we can close with this. Dylan Brooks, who you were part of drafting, had a huge postseason against the Jazz. Really turned it on at the end of the year last year, as far as his defense popping, his offense being more consistent. What do you see for Dylan? Like, I don't think we expect him to be a 25 point per game scorer, but is he approaching his ceiling, or what do you think we can see from Dylan this next season, the next couple of years?
I still think he can do more from beyond the 3-point line. Actually, I think maybe he could hunt those shots maybe even a little more than he does right now. I still think he's developing as a distributor, actually, off the bounce. I think his first 2 years especially was very focused on scoring, and he still likes to score, don't get me wrong, but you can see more that he sees the next play now, and he has some passes in his bag. Like he can throw left-handed passes. And so I do think there's maybe another level of playmaking with him too. So I don't think he's hit a ceiling yet. I certainly would not expect him to, repeat the stats that he put up in that Utah series, but I still think there's another notch he can go up.
Any thoughts on his quest to become the first player since the 50s to lead the NBA in personal fouls for 3 straight seasons?
Wow. That's a great stat. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think he's the first perimeter player. I think that maybe
durability is a key to that, though, right?
It really is. No, the guy plays games. The guy plays games. So that's when you're getting those total fouls. Well, anyway, John, thanks for coming on. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully you'll come on again sometime.
All right. Thanks for having me.
It's now time for the last drop, and I'm joined by our buddy, Caitlin Cooper. Caitlin, how's it going?
Doing well. You probably can't see it, but I'm actually demonstrating my brand loyalty. I have a Fastbreak Breakfast shirt on.
Run to YouTube. Caitlin is wearing a Fastbreak Breakfast shirt, and I didn't even notice. Thank you.
It can barely be seen. It's color purple. I'm totally.
We accept a purple background if needed. It's not the official. Maybe an alternate jersey. Caitlin, you're an expert on the Indiana Pacers. How are things going with the Pacers? You guys, everyone's hurt. Is that the news?
I mean, I feel like that's the perpetual news from the last 3 years. But yeah, I mean, I guess it sounds like the Karis LeVert thing isn't going to be super major. I mean, Woj and what they said at practice. I mean, even Karis said I've been through worse.
It's just a
not
fractured
great.
back.
It's just a fractured back. I mean, it's not great.
Who hasn't had a fracture in their back?
Yeah, it's not great when you're talking about, they want to work on their togetherness and being able to gel as a team under a new coach. And he's probably not going to be a participant in preseason. So obviously TJ Warren's already on the shelf. Edmund Sumner ruptured his Achilles. So they're already down 3 people, 2 starters.
So TJ Warren, nothing's optimistic there, right? He's going to miss, we think, a large portion of the season again.
They're thinking weeks rather than months is what they said at media day. So he has to get scans every so often. And I think the last one they said was somewhat positive. He has to get another one in like 3 weeks and then see what the progress is. But hopefully they're thinking not months.
Man. So is this correct? I can't remember if you told me this or not. Last year that Brogdon, LeVert, Warren, and Sabonis and Miles Turner never played?
Yeah, they never played a minute together. So that's going to be postponed a while.
Here's your prop bet. Will they play a minute together this season?
I mean, I would probably take the over there, but I mean, TJ Warren is in a contract year. So depending upon how they feel about, his long-term future, it's potential that if he's out for a while, you might evaluate that. If they get off to a rough start, you also might evaluate, what direction you want to go in. But I think that they will play together before the trade deadline. That's me going out
before the trade deadline. Because that's what I'm thinking. I mean, that's what I'm thinking here. How many of those guys are totally healthy before the trade deadline? Because I mean, probably this team's gonna make a move, you'd think, this year, as far as a trade.
It's tough to say because they're not really a front office that does a lot of midseason trades. Like last year was somewhat of an aberration because they needed Victor to come back, recoup some of his value so that they could move him. And then obviously the James Harden thing kind of forced its way and that opportunity presented itself. But generally, like they've said in the past, like when they sign somebody or they draft somebody or whatever it is, they'd rather do that business in the offseason. But, they've been running this core back for a while now. So if they do get off to a rough start and it doesn't seem like they're going to be able to make a push into where they want to be, I could see changes happening.
So if LeVert is unavailable, let's say he's unavailable for opening night. We know TJ Warren is out. Who's going to step up there?
I would project probably Justin Holiday will be in that spot because, you look at Rick Carlisle's offense, a lot of times they're using guard to guard screens or they're using Spain actions with back screeners, flare screens. You're going to need a movement shooter. Plus Sabonis is just going to pair well with a movement shooter using DHOs and stuff. So I would look at Justin. But if it's both of them, then it might be Jeremy Lamb and Justin. Like if they're both out of the starting lineup.
Is Jeremy Lamb, he's totally healthy?
That's what he said at media day, that he feels like he's 100% back now after dealing with the ACL and then the nagging injuries that kept him out. I mean, he was another guy that didn't play in the play-in tournament. So
Right. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me if you have Brogdon, who we assume is fully healthy. He's always it feels like he's
cross your fingers.
He's frequently nicked up, and then if you start Holiday and Lamb, is Duarte in consideration maybe for a crack in a starting spot if LeVert doesn't make it back?
I mean, I think he should be for the reasons I just said. I mean, he's their best bet at having a pull-up threat, a guy who can create space as a shooter and do a lot of that other stuff, play on ball, off ball. He has great defensive instincts away from the ball. It just depends on how much they want to throw at him right away as a rookie. I mean, I haven't seen what he's doing in camp. I'd wait to see preseason first, but I think he should be in the mix and considered. Sounds like they're not going to be completely married to a starting lineup either. Like with these injuries, they might be willing to flex it out depending upon what matchups are. Like I would think if you're going to go against a team with like pretty formidable wing option, then you might even look at Torrey Craig and at that 3 spot rather than just so you can have more defense. But
if they're not going to be totally committed to like a set starting lineup, is Carlisle ready to roll Domantas Sabonis 6th man of the year?
No, let's not start that narrative, Keith.
Not going to move him to, he's fully committed to the Twin Towers.
I don't know that they're fully committed to it. I mean, they said that they think that they're both unique and offer things. And I think that's what they should be presenting as coach and GM speak. And I think that they both need to be starting and finishing games. Otherwise, it's time to pull the plug on this operation. Like, it's time to move one of them. If you have to move one of them to the bench in order for this to work, which it was rumbled that, I mean, the Indy Star had reported that there was a league source that thought they might move Miles to the bench. And Miles at media day indicated that he wants to have more of a two-way role. He wants to be getting more touches. So maybe that's some some of the thinking behind there. That if he
that's the wrong media day quote, Miles. We don't need our picket. We don't need our defensive stalwart, stretch big guys to say like, I need more offensive touches. I've seen that bag. It is non-existent.
Yeah, I just don't know where it's coming from. You're not going to run offense through him like you do Sabonis, which is why Sabonis has so many touches. And are you going to be taking that away from Karras and Brogdon? I think probably not. I mean, if Miles comes back, like if Miles worked really hard over the summer and he proved to me like, hey, my 3-point shot has come around, I've added some other stuff to my game, then sure, reward him for that. But based on what we've seen up until this point, I can't really see tilting a bunch of the offense to him. But
yeah, I'm sorry. This quote has really knocked me off kilter. The Miles Turner is one of the worst, like as far as like posting up or doing a move, one of the worst offensive players I've seen in that sense. Like he can score because he's big, he gets dunks, he shoots a good percentage from three, has a nice looking jump shot. But like the idea, he can't create offense.
Right. Like I think he needs to play off the action. And I think that they'll probably do more with cuts with him. Some of the lob plays, like it might not necessarily be a lob, but you could repurpose it into a roll. Probably look to get him some more stuff around the basket, similar to what Nate Bjorkgren did. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure where that's going to come from. And it wasn't like he was super prickly about it. He was just I don't want to be pigeonholed, and I'd like to have more of a two-way role, and that he's wanted that for the past 2 years.
I mean, it seems like Carlisle would just want him to be his Porzingis and obviously shoot just way more threes. Is that possible? I mean, you wrote the piece for 538 about spacing, like you don't have to shoot well to be a spacer if people give you that respect. Like you wrote about Eric Gordon, like Miles Turner, good percentage, but no one cares because he's not going to keep shooting them.
Exactly. And I wrote the inverse piece last year about Miles, and a few things changed because he is a better cutter now than he was a year ago. But yeah, only 27% of his threes were contested last year. And like he did put the ball on the floor, but I mean, not all those are closeouts. Like 11% of his shots were drives. So for me, you don't have to shoot a great percentage, but it is a little bit different at the 5 spot than it is at guard spots, because if you're picking and popping, teams are going to pick their poison and be like, hey, even if you hit a couple of those, we might be willing to live with it. But beyond that is, he doesn't take self-created threes. Like if he does get contested, he's not really going to create that space for him. He doesn't take a lot of deep threes, which was kind of the point with some of that Eric Gordon and Porzingis. Porzingis is pulling from rather deep. So you're not necessarily stretching the defense a few extra feet from there. But if you want to get him extra attempts, and I think Carlisle can work on this because this is something that Porzingis did, you could get Miles extra attempts by using him as a trailer. And that's not really something that they've done. Like trailer threes are almost always there for bigs, because in transition, the first big back's going to protect the basket and the second big back's going to load to the ball. So it's pretty easy for a 5-man to step into a shot there, but they don't always have him run those routes. So I think getting him shots there makes the defense react in a little bit different way, but we'll see.
Also, do you think they're going to prioritize, because they have these 2 big men, are they going to try to find more time for their other big men? They drafted Isaiah Jackson and then Goga Bitadze. We haven't seen a ton from him so far in his NBA career.
I mean, I think they should play all 4 of those guys at once. Don't you, Keith?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Put O'Shea Brissett at point.
Man, if the Nuggets can start Bol at the 2, why not?
Why not? But yeah, I mean, I think Goga's stock is trending fairly low. I mean, if you're going to be staggering him more, I'm not exactly sure where those minutes are going to come from unless one of them gets hurt, which, in Pacerland is always a possibility. But Isaiah Jackson, it seems like, I mean, they said a lot of glowing things about him and his ability to challenge shots on the perimeter. But I think they see him as somewhat of a 4, that if he can continue to develop his shot, maybe minutes come there, and then he'd be competing with like O'Shea and Torrey Craig and whoever else they see fitting the small ball 4 role. So.
Well, that's a good summary. Is there anything else that you're looking forward to? You want to what is a Pacers fan? Like, are there goals? Like, what's the excitement level? Is it just, about Chris Duarte being awesome? And
I mean, I think that what I'm excited about is just watching competent, normal defense. I'm hopeful for that. Everything they talked about on media day was a lot of togetherness and focusing on getting their defense right, because they're confident in their ability to put forth offense. I mean, they showed they could do that, make improvements in that area last year. And we know Rick Carlisle can coach offense. So they can shore up those 2 areas. And then I guess you gotta, as far as changes go, you just got to be hopeful that the rookies can offer something, because the rest of the roster is mostly the same. So.
And you're thinking playoffs?
I mean, I'm not gonna. I feel like my last appearance on this show is going to get played back at some point, where I predicted that the Pacers would be a playoff team.
No
Jeff Teague will be on my face.
No one ever cares about predictions. No one will lord this over you. But like, that's what they're shooting for, right? They want to be 7th.
I mean, they talk about it a lot and they're like, we want to get back to being a playoff team, but they didn't want to set like firm expectations. And they talk about how hard it's going to be, which the East did improve. So, but to me, it should be playoffs or bust at this point in time with how you're looking at that roster. If you can't get back into the playoffs this year, then it's time to move on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Caitlin. If the Pacers struggle, I'll queue up some of these predictions you made and make sure no one forgets them. Anyway,
put sad Jeff Teague next to my head, please, because that's what I'll deserve.
We will do it. Look forward to the next time. All right. Hey, thanks. That was great.
No problem. Thanks.
Yep. See ya.